There he is, Congressman Schneider coming through. Can't wait to get on the Lake Forest podcast. Can I give you a hug? Come on, let me give you a hug. How you feel? How do you think the game's going to go, Congressman?
We're playing well. We got to get this win.
All right, see you on the Lake Forest podcast. All right.
The Lake Forest podcast is supported by viewers, listeners, and businesses just like you. Michelle Parno has lived and worked in Lake Forest for over 2 decades. Michelle's lending experience, when combined with her real estate expertise, makes her an invaluable asset to her clients as they navigate their home buying or selling process. Call Michelle now at 847-528-8721, 847-528-8721. For the best cannabis in the world, look no further than Iliad Epic Grow. Owned by Lake Bluff's own Rich Ruzich, they are a cannabis cultivation center focusing on hard-to-find small batch products that will delight both the occasional user and ganjier. When visiting Michigan, ask for it by name. Epic Products, exceptional process. For more information, email info@iliadgrow.com. Laracy & Company CPAs, founded in 2010 by Lake Forest's own Brian Laracy, specializes in tax preparation and bookkeeping services. Earning the People Love Us on Yelp award, their process is straightforward. Just upload, review, and file. For a free quote, visit LaracyCPA.com now. That's LARISEYCPA.com. I'm excited to share with you something special from our Lake Forest community, the Aesthetic Lounge Med Spa, located at 775 North Bank Lane in Lake Forest near Wisconsin Avenue. This just isn't any spa. They offer an amazing blend of traditional spa services plus the added benefit of medical procedures and treatments. In a relaxing and luxurious spa environment, you can enjoy a range of cosmetic and aesthetic treatments. These are all performed under the supervision of top medical professionals. The Aesthetic Lounge Med Spa provides skin care, facial rejuvenation, body contouring, laser hair removal, Botox, dermal fillers, chemical peels, and much more. What's great is that each treatment is tailored not just to enhance your appearance, but also to address specific skin concerns and to promote overall well-being. So if you're looking to pamper yourself and take your beauty routine to the next level, give the Aesthetic Lounge Med Spa a call at 224-768-8028 or visit them at their location on North Bank Lane. It's an experience your skin will thank you for. We'd also like to say we're thankful for our Patreon supporters, Otto, John C., Helen, Herrick, and J.M.
You know, Joe, I'm thinking about turning Democrat. I need to get some literature. Any idea where I can go for that?
I got a guy.
You know a guy? Okay.
Yeah. Brad Schneider.
I got a guy for you.
Congressman.
Beat what took so long.
Well, I'm in Illinois. Only way I can win. Can I be a conservative Democrat?
You can actually.
Is that allowed?
Absolutely.
Here's
Good morning, Congressman. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Okay.
Your path in has the best chicken pot pie. I was there Monday night.
No, we're big fans. I like to poke fun at their prices, but then I saw that they're not any higher than anywhere else. So I'm like, all right, it's a good joint.
Yeah, Pete, I'll tell you. So it was actually Sunday night. I was at Lake Forest College, and then my wife and I went over for dinner. The pot pie was $20, which is no different than if you got it at some fast food restaurant.
That's what I'm saying.
That's the problem right now. Even fast food is $20.
And you factor in your time having to cook it, never do something that doesn't pay an hourly wage that you're accustomed to. Isn't that what a good consultant would say, Congressman Schneider?
I would say do what's in the best interest of your clients and customers. Take care of the people who take care of you.
That's right. Well, Congressman Brad Schneider, thank you for coming on the Lake Forest podcast, the virtual public house. Thank you so much.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Okay.
Great to see you, Congressman. Thank you.
Now, kind of what we're going to do is just like, old friends, getting to be old friends, like Joe and I are old friends. We're at the bar and then somebody taps us on the shoulder and say, you mind if I sit in? Okay, great. Congressman Schneider, you just happen to give us the tap and you're sitting in. We're all in the 10th district and, we hear things. And just like any bar, you hear stuff. It may not be true, but find out the people that know what the facts are and invite them in, address it, and then move on to something else. And that's why we have you here. Fair enough?
Sounds good. I'm here.
Okay. Well, let's get to know you a little bit. The pride of Denver, Colorado. Is that true, Congressman?
Born and raised, third generation Denver.
Okay. I got an uncle in Lakewood.
All right. I grew up not far from there, and I've been in Chicago area since 1979.
Is that because of Northwestern?
It is. I came to school in the fall of 1979, attended my first Wildcats game. They beat Wyoming, and I said, this isn't going to be so tough. And then they went on to lose 34 of their next football games, and I got to experience that record-breaking losing streak. But they've been much better in the years since.
Well, I went to VSIU, and I chose them over Northwestern, of course. But Northwestern has a fine history, especially Billy McKinney. Isn't that right? Didn't we see each other at the Journey retiring?
There he is, Congressman Schneider coming through. Can't wait to get on the Lake Forest podcast. Can I give you a hug? Come on, let me give you a hug. How you feel? How do you think the game's going to go, Congressman?
We're playing well. We got to get this win.
All right, see you on the Lake Forest podcast. All right.
Billy played basketball for Northwestern in the 70s. The pride of Zion, Illinois was a ZB. And after a long career in the NBA, both as a player and a scout, front office executive, he's now the mayor of Zion and back in Illinois. We're glad to have him.
Well, we got to put him on the list next to, give a talk. Talk about the nuclear plant out there. Is it still out there?
No, it's been taken down. What we're left with are 64 concrete-clad casks of spent nuclear fuel. And one of the things I'm working on since I came to office is trying to find a place to store the spent fuel. The entire country, we have fuel rods all over the country, other nuclear waste, so we need a place to store it permanently and safely.
There's a lot of stuff going on. I have the impression Joe is see his lapel pin. He's got a lapel pin like you, so he's a professional politician.
Jim Edgar gave me this lapel pin, Congressman.
Oh, very nice.
And I don't have any pins. I don't need no.
You got to get him a pin, Congressman.
when we go to the bar, we'll pin one on.
Sounds good.
But kind of where I want to go, because we got a hard stop at an hour. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, good, because you got to take care of your peeps. Totally understand. I keep seeing and hearing things that I don't understand. I vote Republican. I've gone down the list, and I moved to the Lake County probably 4 or 5 years ago. I've been a Cook County guy my whole life. Grew up in the inner city. Democrats, precinct men. I've seen the buses go in and buy shots and beers for everybody. And I get it, So you start off in the city and then you work your way up, and then, you're looking at the jockey, which is the person running for the position. Then you look at the horse, and I kind of evolved over to the horse. To me personally, for Pete Jansen's, the horse that I like are anybody that does the most for first responders, and small businessmen, because as you know, 98% of the country, even more, is made up of small businessmen. I have so much respect for people that have put up the risk to start up a business. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I don't understand this immigration thing. Here's what my perception, and then you pick it apart. I see people coming across the border in a unorganized fashion. And let's just say use Texas. The state isn't equipped to deal with a federal issue. So the governor of the state is saying, okay, great. You know what? There are cities out there that said, hey, we will take these people that are coming across, and they put them on buses and send them out. My question is, like Ellis Island, I know it's not being used anymore, but in its heyday in the 30s, they had a pretty good system of bringing people through. Why is the process, to me, seem to be unorganized on processing people that are coming through and then getting moved on? I will hang up and listen for my answer, Congressman.
I'm going to come to that in a second. I want to start where you started, which is small business people and first responders. And I'm going to expand it a little bit, and it's really about community. I represent, just by way of introduction, I'll give you some background. The 10th district goes from Wilmette, just north of Northwestern, but all the way up to the Wisconsin border. We have the northern slice of Lake County. We've got New Trier Township, Winnetka, Wilmette, Kenilworth, and Glencoe. We have Northbrook, we have Wheeling. We have probably 75% of Lake County in the 10th district, and we pick up now the northeast corner of McHenry County. It's about 750,000 people. That's made up of dozens of municipalities. You've got 3 counties, you've got townships, you've got the cities and villages. What I believe, and what inspired me to run in the very first place, is I believe the stronger our communities are, which includes the local businesses. Local businesses are the ones who are sponsoring the Little League soccer and baseball and football teams. It includes our schools and education. It includes our fire and police. All of that makes a community. And the stronger our communities are, the stronger our counties will be, the better our state will be. And ultimately, that's good for the nation. Again, by background, I mentioned I went to Northwestern. I studied engineering, went into business, got an MBA. Started my career working with large, as you said, Fortune 500, actually Fortune 100 and Fortune 10 companies. Traveled around the country, did some international travel. But when I got married, it was clear that I wanted to be close to home, close to where my kids were. And I ended up, again, being part of the community, coaching soccer, coaching baseball with my kids as they grew up, working in their schools, but also working with local businesses. So I spent my career working mostly with family-owned, closely held, those small businesses owned by men and women who are a part of their community. And that's really what inspired me to go to Congress. So this is my 5th term. I had 3 terms as a member of the Small Business Committee. I've been strongly advocating to support our first responders long before the COVID crisis, but in particular during COVID, where they were literally at the front lines. And so, we start the conversation, we were talking earlier, Democrat, Republican, but we end up with a lot of overlap. And I think that's the way we should approach all things. And that's just a general philosophical thing. So let me talk about immigration. I can tell you why it's such a mess. And I'm going to censor myself and use polite words here since we're just meeting. But it's a mess because we haven't dealt with immigration for probably 30 years. When I first came into Congress in 2013, the Senate actually passed immigration reform. And when we talk about immigration reform, let's split it into 2 pieces. There's the immigration laws. We talked about Ellis Island, how people get permission to come into this country, the process they go through to get to this country. Once they're in this country, the process they go through to become a part of the country, to work here, to become citizens, etc. Those laws haven't been updated in decades. And then there's border security, knowing who's coming in. Most illegal immigrants, quote unquote, are coming in at our airports, at our regular ports. They come in on a visa, a tourist visa for 3 months, and they stay for 3 or 30 years. We need to fix that. And we've been trying to fix that long before I got to Congress. Senate passed a bill in 2013. So it was 68 to 32, bipartisan support. It went to the House. It would have gotten 300 votes. And we'll talk about this pattern of not bringing votes to the floor. But then Speaker John Boehner blocked it. And we've seen that time and time again since I've been in Congress. We have a crisis at our borders. We have a crisis of migration around the world. But we're certainly seeing it, people wanting to come to the United States. And you know what? I'm thrilled people want to come to the United States. We're the country of opportunity. We're the country where people can come and plant themselves, grow roots, get a job, start a business, do all the things that are the American dream. But we need to have a system that makes it feasible. And too many people can't get in, so they're coming in through the gaps in the border, if you will. That's why border security becomes important. And then we have this gap on asylum. They come, most of the people in the southern border are going directly to the Border Patrol officers. They say, I'm here, I'm seeking asylum. Where I live is too dangerous, I'm not safe, I'd like to apply for asylum. And that's their right. What they know is it could take up to 10 years to go through the asylum process to have their case adjudicated. And while they're waiting here in the United States. That's why the legislation that earlier this year, James Lankford, conservative Republican from Oklahoma, Kirsten Sinema, an independent from Arizona, Chris Murphy, a liberal Democrat from Connecticut. They sat down and worked out a strong compromise. Probably if you put it on a spectrum on the football field, it was on the 40-yard line on the Republican side. It had more conservative pieces to it, things that we need to do. And within 48 hours, that collapsed because there just isn't the will. What we need is that will to work together. So that's the problem, why we have this problem. Now, you brought up another issue, which is what's going on from the state, the federal, the state, and the local level. The immigration crisis, and let's be clear, it is a crisis, is a national problem. National problem needs a national solution. That means we need to work federal, state, and local, and you're not seeing that happen. Everyone's fighting. So you have the governor of Texas literally putting people on buses blindly and sending them all over the country without notice. They just show up in different places, including here in Illinois. We have a stake in this in Illinois. We have a responsibility to help the nation address it, but we should be doing it, as you said, in a structured way. My grandmother came from Ukraine. I'm sure we're going to talk about Ukraine at some point today. She came, interesting part of the story, her family, she was 5 years old. Her family left in 1912. Somehow they got from Ukraine to England, and they were supposed to be on the Titanic. But her brother, my late great uncle, got sick, and they waited for a week, thank goodness. But they came in. They were sponsored by a cousin who lived in a tiny little town called La Junta, Colorado. They ended up in La Junta. By the way, I've lived my entire life, or grew up in Colorado. My parents live in Colorado. I've never been to La Junta, but it was this tiny little town somewhere in Colorado. They made their way to Denver and Boulder, and that's where I grew up. That's the American story. We need to get back to that structured system. The last thing I'll say, and I'll link it back to small businesses. What are we doing for small businesses? You go talk to any business in this county, in Lake Bluff, in Lake Forest, or in McHenry, or in Cook County. You say, what are the challenges you face? They'll talk about the standard things, but all of them share one common challenge, and that's finding good people to fill the jobs they need done. Our population would be shrinking if not for immigration. People are having, on average, 1.6 kids. That's not enough to replace. We need immigration, but we need smart immigration, and that's what I've been trying to do in Congress since I got there.
I hate pointing the fingers at something without offering a solution. A problem that's understood is, more than half solved. So why is there a constraint to process these people?
I'm going to pick on both sides. I'm pointing at fingers at the naysayers, not the ones in the middle trying to get stuff done. Why are we struggling? Well, it's a matter of resources. We have so many people, and we don't have enough Border Patrol agents. We don't have enough immigration attorneys. The courts are overwhelmed. And it's kind of like traffic on the highway. It doesn't, if you add too many cars, it doesn't slow down. It utterly stops and jams up the system. And we're seeing that. Part of the immigration package that should have been included in the bill passed last Saturday, originally was, when we were talking about it, was for more judges, more Border Patrol, so we could get the system moving more slowly. Why is it so hard? I'll go back to 2013, where we had a compromise in the Senate. Right? The world I live in, we know we need two things. We need better border security, and we need reform of our immigration laws. Right? I've got people on one side who say we can't reform immigration laws until we reform border security. I've got people on the other side who can't reform border security until we do immigration laws. Now, those of us in the middle look at this and say, well, why don't we do both together? But the trust is so low on the two extremes that no one's willing to do that. And that's kind of the challenge that we're facing. So we had the Senate bill in 2013 went nowhere. In 2017, when President Trump ended the DACA program, when he announced that he was ending DACA, I got calls. Our district, 10th district, has, at our peak, we had 15 Fortune 500 companies headquartered in our district. I was getting calls from their CEOs saying, you have to fix DACA. These people are a part of our company. They've been here. They've risen in the ranks. We've got teachers. We've got doctors who are part of DACA. It's an important thing. I'm a member of the Problem Solvers Caucus. In fact, one of the founding members. And back in 2017, we worked at getting to that compromise. We got to a proposal that now with Speaker Paul Ryan at this time, he blocked it from coming to the floor because, again, the naysayers are screaming at each other. So as President Biden's trying to do stuff, we've got people on the right who are saying, no, don't give President Biden a win. We got people on the left who say, no, you can't do anything that's going to make it harder for people to come into our country. We need structured, controlled immigration. I think the vast majority, again, I could get at least 300. I bet we're closer to 400 out of 435 votes who will say, yes, we need structured immigration. People who will come in who can fill needed jobs, whether it's in healthcare, education, construction, you run down the whole list, especially in a Congress that is so narrowly split. As of this week, it's a 1-vote majority for the Republicans. So that means one Republican can stop the majority from acting only as a majority. We had that in the last Congress with the Democrats. And on either side, we need to, again, what we did this past week with the national security bills, pass legislation where we had 311, 366, and 385 on the Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan security packages. If you give me 300 votes, I can pass anything, but you're getting it from the middle, not from the extremes.
I think, you touched on some of the past bills, and I think that one in 2013 was the Gang of Eight one, right? That
Senator Durbin and Marco Rubio, and it was a good bill, and I helped introduce it in the House. I was naive enough back in my first year thinking this isn't so hard. I've got my first major bill, and it went nowhere.
But why is it that, there's so much rhetoric, as you said, from both sides on this, but when you strip away the rhetoric, I don't think they're that far apart. Like, people, and look, Donald Trump is who he is, and, we can talk all day about him, but there was somebody that took a couple of his speeches on immigration and then played it up against speeches on immigration by President Bill Clinton in the 90s, and they were very similar speeches. How do you get past this to actually get something done? Because as you said, I think the last piece of legislation on this was when Reagan was president. It was Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill probably sitting over a cocktail at 5 o'clock somewhere and cutting a deal on that. And it seems like those days are long gone, where you can, where people can sit down in a room together and get something accomplished. How do we get back to that?
Well,
because I think most people are frustrated with gridlock.
I'll come to that in a second. I'll tell a story that you just reminded me of that is how you do it. So Anheuser-Busch does this Brew Across America challenge. And it's members of Congress, bipartisan, Republican, Democrat, and we meet with their experts and we brew beer. And I did it with a guy from Oklahoma, Kevin Hearn. And we went down to 312. I went down to 312 and picked out the hops and everything. And we created a recipe for our beer. We didn't win. Everyone said we had the best beer, but it was a rigged election. We'll talk about that later. We have to come up with a name for your beer. And we called our beer Gip and Tip. So Ronald Reagan, the Gipper, and Tip O'Neill, because they would get together after hours and have a beer. In fact, Ronald Reagan would sneak out of the White House to go meet Tip O'Neill to grab a drink, which is we got to get back to where we can sit down and talk to each other, and it's something I'm committed to. So Kevin's on the Ways and Means Committee with me, and we work well together, and so we did that, and we'll be back at it next year, trying to win it again. But that's how you do it. So to your point, we have to be able to talk to each other, and this effort by both sides to define the other as only extreme, where Republicans call every Democrat a socialist, and there are socialist Democrats, DSA. They're not even a part of the Democratic Party, but they label that issue. And there's people who call Republicans by their epithets, and it's just not fair.
I do want to point back to Northwestern University, because right now we're kind of hemming and hawing on what to do. I asked that specific question: how do we get everybody together, to Morty Shapiro and Saul Morrison? It's really hard to have a common goal now for everybody to gather around. I mean, Pearl Harbor, Man on the Moon, 9/11. We had just what happened in Afghanistan. That's not a big enough deal for the country to come together. What do you think it'll take for everybody to have a common goal? Because if you're in a foxhole, or if it's 4th and 1, it's hard to find an atheist in that foxhole. What needs to happen in America for us to get our act together?
Let me start and and then Saul can answer that question. That's what we do as tenured faculty, is we avoid tough questions, and we say what we wanted to say anyway. But I want to get back to something, Stu, that you said right before we went live on this. And you said something like, well, far left and far right. I think I was the one who said they almost have a begrudging respect for each other, but what they hate is 90 degrees away. 180 degrees is one thing, but 90 degrees, they don't have any morality. They don't have any, I think that's what your point was, Stu, that they just, compromisers, right? They don't have the strength of their convictions. And that's what this book really is about. It's about how to learn from each other, treat each other with respect, and really engage in a productive way, not in a screaming way that everybody's screaming and no one's listening. So, that's now how we're going to get there. And actually, Saul and I have very different levels of optimism, mainly because Saul is an expert in Russian history, which suggests that the world is indeed coming to an end. But Saul, is there any event that could bring us together? What do you think?
Well, that's a really interesting question. It would have to be the sort of event where people felt that it was more important to work with each other than to use the crisis as a way to beat up on each other. That would be what it have to be. And you could tell, and we've had many of those in our history. Pearl Harbor obviously being one. But I find it. I don't think it's impossible, but I find it hard to imagine what it would be now. It wasn't a pandemic which would kill. I mean, pandemic kill Republicans and Democrats alike, right? This crisis, in Afghanistan. I mean, okay, so now you get everybody criticizing the president, but they most want to criticize each other, right?
Yeah.
And what would it be? I don't know. If there were if we had a major depression, well, you could play the blame game on that. What couldn't you? And there probably is something, and I'm hoping it's going to be, but I can't imagine it.
They were dumbfounded. They said, I don't know what it would take. It's because Pearl Harbor, 9/11, Man on the Moon, getting something where the country has a unified goal, the community has a unified goal to point to, and we're not organized in what the goal is that we want, and not even the past president of the Northwestern and the current Russian professor over at Northwestern. In fact, Saul said, I don't know if you know these guys or not, I'm sure you do, but Saul said, I wouldn't be surprised if we were speaking Russian in 10 years.
That's a scary thought.
That's very scary.
I was going to say, last fall, Mark Kirk and I went to Stevenson High School and met with students at the school. And it was just a sit-down conversation like we're having here, a program I conceived called Bridges, and I want to do more of this, where we talked to the kids and we took the students and we took their questions and we answered them. Mark represented the 10th district in the past, then became a senator, Republican. I represent the district now, a Democrat. And we sat and we talked just like we're talking now. And what the students saw is we agree on a lot. And where we disagree not on ultimate goals. We all want a strong United States. We want our kids to get the best education possible. We want innovation in this country to lead the world. We believe, and Mark and I talk fairly regularly, we believe that the United States has a fundamental responsibility because we are able, and perhaps the only one able, to lead the world, to protect the world order.
All right, we're done with immigration. Basically,
well, I just have one other quick question on it, Congressman, and that so they are coming on buses, and first the buses went to Chicago. Then when Chicago kind of pushed back on it, they started showing up at metro stations around the area. I don't think they've hit Lake Forest, but they've hit pretty much every other community around Lake Forest, and it wouldn't surprise me if they did hit Lake Forest at some point. But big picture, need to pass some type of comprehensive reform. But what do we do until then? What's the role here of the federal government versus the state government versus local governments, and how do we manage what is really truly a crisis? I mean, I walked by that was it the Standard Club or whatever downtown where they're housing a lot of these individuals, and it's just chaos there on the street, and not through the fault of the people, but it's just disorganization. How do we fix that for now while we work on the big picture?
A national problem. We need a national response. The first thing, and this is something I've tried to do for the last couple of years and will continue to push, is we need more resources. We need more resources at the border for security. We need more resources in the courts to process these people. One of the things that President Biden is trying to advance is rather than taking it 6 years or a decade or longer to hear a case for asylum, to do it much more quickly so that the people who really do have a case, who are fleeing for their lives because of the country they live in or where they're from, life is just too dangerous, that we provide that asylum. But those who are economic refugees, who are looking just for better opportunity, we want to offer better opportunity, but there's a process for that. You apply for a visa, you go through the immigration process, you get your papers, and then you come in, and it's much more structured. You mentioned that, what was happening with these buses. It wasn't that Chicago was routing them to the suburbs. It was they were being routed to the suburbs intentionally from Texas by Governor Abbott and unannounced. And I think it took a while, but the state has gotten, I think, its footing. Immigration numbers are down right now, so it's a more manageable flow. As the summer months come, there's certainly a risk that that's going to increase, so we need to get ahead of it. The most important thing at the federal level we can do, and I'll go back to working Republicans, Democrats together, and hopefully the problem solvers will be at the forefront of this, is we need to get the resources to make sure that the flow is addressed, ideally before these people get to the border. Many of them are coming through Central America, all the way walking across Mexico or being driven across Mexico by the traffickers and dropped off in buses. A lot of people, you may have seen the 60 Minutes episode, coming from China, flying from China. And these are not poor people fleeing with only a shirt on their back. These are middle-class, wealthy Chinese who are seeking to get in the United States. They fly, oftentimes first class, to Mexico. They catch a taxi or a bus to the border, and they walk across and say, I'm here for asylum. We need to address all of these things. We also need to invest in technology. One of the things we talk a lot about, the concern about fentanyl in this country, 100,000 people dying of drug overdoses. This is a major crisis affecting every state. It doesn't discriminate based on political affiliation, rural, urban. It is a real crisis. Most of that fentanyl is coming across the organized crossings, being carried over by citizens, people who are coming in legally, but they're stuffing this in their cars. They're stuffing it in suitcases, the fentanyl. It takes very little product to cause massive amounts of damage. And that product can be hidden in a suitcase, in the little compartments in a car, even on people's bodies. The technology to identify that before it crosses the border, that's something we need to be investing in as well. So it takes will, it takes money, but it also takes political cooperation.
Boy, this guy's got it down compared to 2012, man. Congressman Schneider, you got the jet. You got it down.
If I'm not better at something after doing it for a decade, shame on me.
We went back and watched all your debates with Bob Dold, 2012, and you ran in
2012, 2014, and 2016.
Right. So we watched, some of them were at Lake Forest High School.
Right. I think if you watch those, they got, Bob had a one-term head start on me. So he had the advantage. But I think by the time we got to 2016, we both knew what we were doing in our job. We both talked about substance. And I think the electorate's better off when we can have substantive conversations about issues, about policy, rather than people screaming at each other and
but you guys did disagree. There's a couple. We had a guest on, I hate to even say his name, that ran against you last time, that may be running as an independent candidate this time. What we're talking about, that says there's no difference between you and Bob Dold or Mark Kirk, and that the uniparty. But I watched those debates, and they were yes, you guys sat in a room together, civilized, but there were things you guys disagreed on. Iran was a big one that you guys really, I don't want to say butted heads, but because I think it was very civil, but there was a strong difference of opinion between you and Congressman Dold on that issue.
Yeah, and I think this is where things get lost. We disagreed on the best approach, right? So there's many ways to get to the top of the mountain. We both agreed absolutely that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon, that Israel is a United States most dependable, most reliable, most important ally in the Middle East, one of our most important allies in the world. Where we disagreed on what's necessarily the best approach. Now, we agreed. I was one of the very few Democrats who opposed going into the JCPOA. In 2015,
What's that?
That's the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. It was the Iran.
That's the Iran deal. Everyone calls it the Iran deal.
Thank you.
And I was critical of it at the time because of sunsets, because it had shortcomings. I felt it could have been a lot stronger. But once it was ratified, and I was not in Congress when it went into effect, once it went into effect, it was the tool we had. And so I didn't think that President Trump should have pulled us out unilaterally, because we lost our leverage. And I've said this, I've talked about this ad nauseum. What I believe we should have done in 2015, once the JCPOA went into effect, is work to strengthen our relationship with our allies, strengthen our position vis-a-vis Iran, make sure that we had the defenses, and then somewhere around right about now, 2023, 2024, when sunsets were supposed to take effect, same way you do with sports contracts for athletes. You go back and you say, you know what, we need to renegotiate it. We don't like the terms of this deal, but you negotiate from a position of strength. And unfortunately, by unilaterally pulling out, I think we lost that negotiating position. So we see where we are today with Iran feeling more emboldened. But I will tell you, I've worked as hard as anyone to make sure Iran never gets a nuclear weapon. In my first term, I introduced with Mark Meadows, of all people, the Hezbollah International Financing Prevention Act, which ultimately became law. I've worked to within the Abraham Accords Caucus, which I'm one of the co-founders and co-chairs of. We introduced the Defend Act, which talks about a coordinated air defense within the Middle East. Well, we introduced that a few years ago. You want to see the impact of those ideas. You saw it several weeks ago when Iran launched 350 missiles at Israel. That launch of 170 drones, 30 ballistic missiles, more than 100, or 30 cruise missiles, more than 100 ballistic missiles, that was completely defeated because Israel, the United States, United Kingdom, but also Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and UAE worked together with air defense and prevented any of Iran's missiles and drones from reaching their targets. That's the power of working together. And so I'm proud of what I've done. I continue to lead, like I mentioned, the Abraham Accords Caucus. I'm friends of the Transatlantic Friends of Israel. I'm chair of the Transatlantic Friends of Israel group, which is members of parliaments from around the world who get together on a regular basis. I led a trip just last month of colleagues to Israel to see the aftermath of the October 7th attack. And really, as much as anything, to show solidarity with Israel. I'm proud of the work I do, supporting a strong U.S. Israel relationship and ensuring that the partnership between our two countries advances not just Israel's interests, but United States interests and the interests of the region, ultimately to get peace for both Israelis, Palestinians, and everyone living in the area.
Whatever happened with the Iran deal happened, right? We can't go back and change what happened. But given what is happening now, can we ever have peace with Iran? Can Israel ever have peace with Iran? I mean, it just seems like they're both dug into silos now of and I totally understand Israel's position. I mean, my God, October 7th, if that wasn't a wake-up call for people, I don't know what was. And I'm sad to see some people's reaction against Israel. And I think you feel the same way about some of the anti-Semitism on college campuses and people blocking O'Hare Airport.
Yellow ribbon is for the hostages. There's 100 hostages still being
But
held.
because this, I know Pete doesn't always like to talk about international stuff, but I think I tell people October 7th, what happened there could happen here.
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to avoid the term silos, and I'll explain why in a second. But, October 7th, Hamas sent 3,000 fighters over the border, killed more than 1,200 Israelis, wounded more than 3,000 more, and took more than 250 people hostage. They started that attack on the morning of October 7th by launching thousands of rockets into Israel. So the Israelis all went into their bomb shelters. They have safe rooms and bomb shelters, which means when the fighters crossed over, Israelis weren't out defending themselves. They were inside these rooms where many people were burned alive. I mean, it was just a horrible attack. Hamas is a nihilistic genocidal terrorist organization. Hamas is funded by Iran. On Israel's northern border is Hezbollah, who has been firing thousands of rockets since October 7th, rockets and drones, this low-level war. Hezbollah is funded by Iran. The Houthis firing missiles from Yemen towards and into a lot into Israel are funded by Iran. If you see, there's a pattern here. Iran is at the root of virtually every crisis within the Middle East right now. And it is their strategy. Their stated goal is the destruction of Israel. They say it over and over and over. They call Israel the little Satan. They call Israel the little Satan because there's a big Satan. And who's the big Satan? It's the United States. Now, let me draw a distinction. That's why I don't want to talk about silos. I'm going to draw a distinction between the Iranian regime, the Ayatollahs, the revolution, the extension of the regime, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. From 1979 forward, this has been their purpose, their mission to destroy Israel, to defeat America, to spread their form of Islam over the entire region, ultimately the entire world. They are a threat not just to the region, but to the world. So we have to stand up to them. And the worst possible thing that could happen is for Iran to get a nuclear weapon, because the threat then becomes not magnified by 1, 2, or 3 times, but infinitely magnified, and it's an entirely different world. So we have to make sure that Iran never can have that nuclear weapon.
Having grown up in the city, go to Pulaski and Archer, and then take a little stroll around with a 10-speed. There's bad people there too. You represent the 10th district. To come up with an objective data point, let's just say Twitter or X, of the influence that you have that you put out there, well more than half is dealing with something that's international. And I want you to spend 100% of your time for me in the 10th district correcting what's going on here. Should I be looking at it that way?
It's a fair question. Look, what happens around the rest of the world affects us here at home. But our priority has to be at home. That's why I spend so much of my time around the district. I mentioned I was at Lake Forest College on Sunday night. I speak to students at schools all around the district. Sit down. My new district, they redrew the lines last year. The new district has a lot of farms. Sat down with farmers in McHenry County. I've done it a couple times now to hear what their issues are. And at the core, many of the issues are the same. Wherever you go around the district, we want to have secure communities. We want to have a prosperous future for our kids. And we want to know that after working a lifetime in whatever job it might be, that we can have a dignified and secure retirement. That is at the core of everything we do. We talked about the foreign aid bill that passed last Saturday. Let's talk about the funding bill that finally passed last month. The government's supposed to go through an annual budgeting process. We start our fiscal year on October 1st. By September 30th of each year, we're supposed to approve a funding bill. This past year, we nearly had a shutdown on September 30th. We avoided that barely, but they kicked the can down the road, then again in November, then again in February, and finally in March. But within that, I fought very hard for the priorities of my district. Priorities, in Lake Bluff, Lake Forest, throughout Lake County, we have an issue of flooding. I've been working on trying to address and remediate flooding, and we've gotten funds for projects. You'll see the projects underway this summer in Lake Bluff that are coming through federal grants. Yesterday, I was in Waukegan talking about gun violence. Gun violence is a scourge that's affecting every community across our country. As you know, I live in Highland Park, where we had that horrific shooting nearly 2 years ago. Well, we brought in $3.6 million total funding for this gun violence prevention project in Lake County. 3.2 million of that are federal dollars. Some of it's a federal grant. Some of it comes from other programs. And $750,000 was from what's called community project funding. As part of the annual budgeting process, each member is allowed to advocate for up to 15 projects for our community. We get 75, 80 applications for those projects. We advocated for them in that bill that passed in March. We brought funding for 14 different projects across the 10th district. My job, and this is one of the things I'm most proud of, I want people to know who I am. They see me around the district. They find me approachable, and they tell me what they care about, and they tell me what they need. And my job is to advocate for the priorities of this district. And that is first and foremost my number one job. But closing the circle, advocating for national security is also a part of that. My son spent 5 years in the Navy. He's actually visiting from school this weekend or this week. He was
Thank him for his service from us.
He was based in the Pacific. He served on a destroyer. They were taking on the Chinese to secure freedom of navigation, as today sailors and ships, U.S. Navy is still doing, to make sure that commerce can flow safely. What's happening with the Houthis trying to close down commercial shipping, that affects prices here. You know, one of the things we talked a lot of, we haven't talked yet, but the cost of living has gone up. We talked about lunch costing a lot of money. Part of that is the cost of moving goods around the world. The United States preserving freedom of navigation for all commercial shipping. And it's not just us, it's a coalition working in the Red Sea and in the Indian Ocean and the Pacific, but working with our allies, make sure that goods can move safely, securely, and that we can have the standard of living that we deserve.
3 points. I don't know how we're going to get to it all, but I've learned that to narrow my stuff down and ask short, brief questions, or you're going to take off on me.
It's the lightning round.
Lightning round. Okay. When I go to, this is the guy from the bar, when I go to vote and there's new machines in there that are reading my signature, and my signature doesn't look like I did the last time I was voting because I had a few cocktails and it's a little blurry. Why can't I just show my ID to vote? Where did that, just explain to me in simple terms why I just can't show my ID?
Yeah. I'm going to go back to what we talked about earlier on the edges, right? Where it controls everything. First of all, machine doesn't read your signature. It's a person. We still do that. And there's the face recognition part of it. The argument against requiring IDs is not everyone can get an ID. So the argument to address that, or the solution to that, is let's make it easier for people to get IDs. Let's you can go to the post office and get an ID, or go. It doesn't just have to be a driver's license. Not everyone has a driver's license because not everyone drives. And so that's the argument. And we see this in so many of the challenges we face locally or nationally, is people always throw up obstacles. Well, if you do that, you might solve 98% of the problem, but there's this 2% that is not going to get solved. Therefore, it's not going to work. Well, I'll take the 80-20 solution. It's called the Pareto Principle. If I can solve 80% of a problem, I've made progress. And once I get that behind me, I now work on the next 20%. And I'll try to solve 80% again, and I'll work on the next 20%. There is no perfect answer. And I just come from the school of don't let perfect be the enemy of good.
Okay, Mr. Consultant, you brought up Wilfredo Pareto. I'm going to come back with Occam's razors. What's the simplest solution?
No, I haven't. And we kind of danced around it. The simplest solution is more citizens getting off the couch and going to vote. The simplest solution is more people participating in the process, and not just the presidential election, the school board election, the dog catcher. Every single election matters to us. I was thinking this, Pete, when you were giving me your opening remarks. What the President of the United States does, whether it's Joe Biden, Donald Trump, George Washington, John Adams, it doesn't matter, has less impact on our everyday lives than the mayors and village presidents in our towns are doing every single day. Now, what federal government does is important. I'm not saying it's not important. It's exceedingly important. But people think that's all that matters. It's those local elections that matter every bit as much.
You're here.
So people more involved. Second thing is people listening to each other rather than trying to scream over each other.
Good luck.
I know. But Pete, this is what I do. Come to my town halls. I listen to everybody. Every time someone raises their hand, I don't ask them if they're my friend or my foe. I call on them. Sometimes that comes to bite me, but more often than not, it doesn't. And as they talk, they may want to just talk for 10 minutes. They've got a speech prepared, and I listen to them. And I I can't think of a time where I haven't had one of those experiences where I can't find at least a few things where we agree. And you start there and you talk about where there's common ground, and then you build out from there. And if you start with the common ground, then again, I believe there's not a problem we can't solve. And my nephew's in 7th grade at Caruso, and so I was invited to speak to the 7th grade class. I had the whole 7th grade, and this was on Monday. They had questions. We went through the whole list. Their questions were every bit as smart and every bit as difficult as when I do a town hall in Johnsburg or Winnetka.
Guns. Okay. I get it. Self-defense. I know there's people on the far right. I don't know why you need a AK-47 or a clip or whatever. I don't get into that. A nice 12 gauge will do you just fine. I get it, but it's such a hot topic, or it's easier to market the device rather than deal with the intent. Where I'm going with it, Congressman, is mental health. And I know you've offered some things up out there for mental health, and I get it. But it just seems to me that mental health will cover drugs, it'll cover guns, it'll cover homelessness. Since the 1970s, insert the exact figure here, but around 60% of the beds that were devoted in the 1970s to mental health have gone away because they have relied, my opinion, on drugs and the local communities to pick up the slack. ERs you can't go to an ER with a mental health issue. You'll just sit there all day. These people and it's not insane. Insane is labeling it incorrectly. A brain is like a fingerprint. It's unique. Everybody's is different. And the stigmatism between being different on a mental health aspect, I believe being underfunded and needs to be addressed. Why is it easier to market banning the guns rather than the intent? And can you touch on mental health?
I don't think it's an either or. I told you I'd be succinct. This may be a little harder on mental health, but I'll draw a distinction between mental health and mental illness, right? And just like physical health, right? If I exercise, if I eat well, there's healthy lifestyle habits, okay? And I may be overweight or out of shape and not exercising. That doesn't mean I'm ill, but I'm not yet healthy. And then there's illness. You could have diabetes, a chronic disease, or you could have a crisis that you're going through, like a heart attack. No different with mental health. And we are falling woefully short in this country on dealing with mental health. And we have a mental health crisis driven by a lot of things. We can talk about social media. I mentioned the 7th graders, and we talked about this for a little bit with them. What our kids today are dealing with and the social pressures are so much greater than what our generation had to deal with before. COVID was devastating to the country and all ages, but in particular, young people. And there's so many more pressures on folks. We don't have enough mental health professionals. We don't have enough when people are in crisis, those hospital beds, those facilities, because there is the stigma, because we're not willing to make the investment. There's a whole host of reasons. Long before I came to Congress, I've been an advocate for trying to do away with the stigma of mental health. Both my boys had ADHD when they were in school. We worked with them. I had to overcome my own prejudices when we were talking about medication and everything, but they successfully got through school. They're now, my oldest is 31, my younger one's 29. We've got to work on providing resources, removing the stigma, and getting people to that healthy. When people are in crisis, and I'm going to switch to talking about guns, one of the things I do believe we should have is universal background checks. And the reason for that is there are people who I believe should not be able to get a gun. Terrorists, easy one. I think we could have 100% agreement on terrorists. Members of gangs, people with histories of domestic violence, but also people with histories of serious mental health issues, especially in the midst of a crisis. The largest number of gun violence deaths in the country are people dying by suicide. That is a convergence, and the most successful way someone is able to take their own life is with a gun. I lost a cousin who took his own life by gun. Yes, it's mental health, but there's also the gun aspect to it. There's more to the guns, and I'll close with this. I'm sure
Yeah.
there's a tradition in this country of whether it's parents or grandparents taking their kids hunting or target shooting, whatever the case may be, teaching them responsibility, independence. That is not where our problem is with guns in this country. And I have no desire to temper that. In fact, we should be promoting that. That's what the NRA, National Rifle Association, was originally founded on, gun safety and hunting, etc. There's also now this other trend developing where young, usually men, but it's not exclusively young boys, young girls involved as well, where they establish their rite of passage by getting a gun, by using a gun. I have a roundtable periodically with the police chiefs in the area. And the last one we had, we talked about how it's middle school kids, not high school kids, but 11, 12, 13-year-old kids who are getting these switches, which can take a handgun and basically a Glock and turn it into automatic firing like a machine gun. This is what our first responders are facing. So there are common sense things we can do. I've passed legislation to put emergency buttons into classrooms. So if there is a crisis, a teacher can alert the first responders. We passed after the Uvalde, horrible shooting in Uvalde, Congress passed the Safer Communities Act. But I do believe universal background checks, ideas like that, the large capacity magazines, those are for military purposes. Let's keep it in the military and keep it off our streets.
And why the universal background check, you take a credit card to buy something in any store, they swipe it or now they insert it. And within, a few seconds, approve or decline the purchase. And I remember back in the 90s, Bob Dole, when he was running for president, he kept saying instant check. Let's get an instant check.
Right.
It seems to me if we can do that with credit cards, why can't we do that with guns?
In fact, when you go to a federally licensed gun dealer, they do the background check, and it takes just a few seconds almost every time. And then sometimes a flag comes up, and now it's the question: is this a concern that is legitimate, or did something come up that maybe it's a coincidence of name? So you have to process that. So there's a little bit of delay. The absolutists who say, remember Charlton Heston, who said, "You'll take this gun from my cold dead hand." That was really the beginning of the NRA moving forward. They said there can be no constraints. We don't want any controls. And then on the other side is, I've had people say to me, "I don't understand why anyone would want a gun." And I say that's a fair concern you may have, but it's not for you to tell people whether they can have a gun or not. That's their right, and I'll protect that right. How do we find that balance that we're keeping our community safe, we're allowing people who want to have a gun, but we're making sure that people who shouldn't have a gun, who are a threat to our community, so we don't have events like Uvalde or what happened in Highland Park, and we reduce the incidence of this daily violence happening. And it's not just in our cities, it's happening in rural communities all across the country, where people have a gun, they have a dispute, they have an argument. I'll flip it back to mental health. If we teach our young people how to resolve their conflicts through conversation, through nonviolent means, they're going to be slower to turn to that gun. And that's what this program in Waukegan that we were talking about, the Gun Violence Prevention Initiative by the state's attorney, that's exactly what they're doing, is teaching these kids how to resolve their conflicts, how to deal with their anger in a constructive way, rather than turning to the convenient gun that just happens to be.
Congressman, I will give my solution on this because I pointed a finger. Please. I think there should be something where the greatest gift you can give someone is control of their outcome or control of their future. And mental health wise, teaching kids in the schools how to breathe, HRV training, I'll put a link to it right here. If that could be part of a health class, a mandatory health class, to learn about the brain, and these feelings that you have are natural. It's not a stigmatism. There's a reason why, and here's something that you can do about it. I think that would be a great thing. And of course, the parents are going to say, "Oh, not for my kid." Okay, I get it. Last thing, Congressman, did you pay for your school? Northwest. Youth guidance. Okay.
They've got a program up in Waukegan schools that I saved this for my son out in California because I want him to get involved in it. These are going into the middle schools, I think even elementary schools, and teaching kids exactly that. So there are people doing exactly what you're talking about. Did I pay for my school?
Yeah.
one of the biggest fights I had with my dad. My folks paid for my undergrad. I paid for room and board my junior and senior year. I was a dorm advisor. I took 3 years off to work, and it was time to go to graduate school. I went to Kellogg Northwestern as well. I had to sit down, had dinner with my dad, and said, "Dad, I want to pay for my graduate school." And he said, "Why? I want to do this." And I told him, I said, my dad was my hero. He was my role model. I lost him last January.
Sorry.
He was the first in his family to go to college. He worked while going to college. He got a degree in accounting, got an MBA, built a small business guy, built a business, an accounting firm, what grew to be one of the largest local firms in Denver. He was my hero. And he set the bar. He paid for his school. I wanted to live up and do that as well. So I paid for graduate school.
I'm sorry for your dad's passing, and we have 1 minute left.
Okay.
What would your dad say right now about forgiving all these student loan debts when your dad busted his ass to pay for it? I paid for my kids' school, and now there's people out there that are getting their tuition bill taken care of. They want to live a certain lifestyle, yet they studied something that didn't pay for it. Why do I have to pay for that? And you have 1 minute to answer. Go.
A little bit. I was asked the exact same question by the 7th graders. So this is, I talked to my son about it. Here's the thing. Cost of college is going through the roof. The price has grown faster than inflation. So, we can talk about choices people make, but someone who I need really good teachers for our kids. My kids had great teachers. I had great teachers. I want every kid to have a great teacher. Someone who goes to college, maybe a first time in their family going to college, they work their way, they take student loans, and they go get a teaching job. Their student loans swamp the income they're earning as a teacher, that they may pay those loans for well into their 50s. It delays their ability to buy a house, to start their life, et cetera, et cetera. So here's my view on it in generally. I think anyone who wants to go to college, and college isn't for everyone, but anyone who wants to go to college should be able to go to college and pay for it with grants, scholarships, work study. And by work study, I mean no more than 10 hours a week plus summers, and loans. And if they take loans, they should be able to pay their loans with virtual certainty in the career of their choice within 10 years. So we have a couple of problems. Cost of school is too high. We're charging high interest rates. We've got to address all of those things. I didn't answer your question about the student loan forgiveness. There is a matter of fairness. I think if we can bring down the cost of schools so that kids don't have to take these loans, that's the best way to solve the problem that we have. And I think as we look at people who were maybe taken advantage of, especially on some of these schools where they didn't get their degree or get their diploma, we can provide relief, which President Biden has been doing. But the long-term solution is by making sure college is affordable, making sure our kids get the educations from preschool through high school to prepare them for college, military, trades, whatever the case may be. And we give everyone the chance to pursue their dreams.
Congressman, we're over.
All right. Caitlin's going to yell at me, and I've got to get to...
That's right.
Can I ask you one real quick question, though? One real quick one.
I'm headed to Jocelyn Center, where we help bring federal funds to help them build a facility to provide more mental health in our community.
You debated Bob. We talked about your debate. You debated Bob Dold. You didn't debate your last opponent, and having him as a guest on the show a couple months ago, I can see why. But your Republican opponent this time is Jim Carris, a former plan commissioner here in Lake Forest. Will you debate Mr. Carris?
I don't know Jim. I look forward to getting to meet him on the campaign trail. I debated Bob Dold. I debated Doug
Congressman,
Bennett.
you can't lose.
And Valerie. Well, no, I said I'm looking forward to be there. We'll have that engagement. And as I said before, we had that good constructive conversations with all of until the last time, with all the previous ones. I expect we'll have the same this time.
Where do we point people to learn more about Congressman Schneider?
You can go to my website, or even better yet, if you see me on the street, say hello, introduce yourself, and let's have a conversation.
We'll see you at Lake Forest Day. You were in the parade last year. Hope to see you again this year in the parade.
I've been there every year. I hope to be there.
Congressman, thank you so much for coming on the Lake Forest podcast.
Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you. It was great talking to you.
Thanks, Congressman.
Bye,
great
guys.
to have you.
The Lake Forest podcast is supported by viewers, listeners, and businesses just like you. Michelle Parno has lived and worked in Lake Forest for over 2 decades. Michelle's lending experience, when combined with her real estate expertise, makes her an invaluable asset to her clients as they navigate their home buying or selling process. Call Michelle now at 847-528-8721, 847-528-8721. For the best cannabis in the world, look no further than Iliad Epic Grow. Owned by Lake Bluff's own Rich Ruzich, they are a cannabis cultivation center focusing on hard-to-find small batch products that will delight both the occasional user and ganjier. When visiting Michigan, ask for it by name. Epic Products, exceptional process. For more information, email info@iliadgrow.com. Laracy & Company CPAs, founded in 2010 by Lake Forest's own Brian Laracy, specializes in tax preparation and bookkeeping services. Earning the People Love Us on Yelp award, their process is straightforward. Just upload, review, and file. For a free quote, visit LaracyCPA.com now. That's LARISEYCPA.com. I'm excited to share with you something special from our Lake Forest community, the Aesthetic Lounge Med Spa, located at 775 North Bank Lane in Lake Forest near Wisconsin Avenue. This just isn't any spa. They offer an amazing blend of traditional spa services plus the added benefit of medical procedures and treatments. In a relaxing and luxurious spa environment, you can enjoy a range of cosmetic and aesthetic treatments. These are all performed under the supervision of top medical professionals. The Aesthetic Lounge Med Spa provides skin care, facial rejuvenation, body contouring, laser hair removal, Botox, dermal fillers, chemical peels, and much more. What's great is that each treatment is tailored not just to enhance your appearance, but also to address specific skin concerns and to promote overall well-being. So if you're looking to pamper yourself and take your beauty routine to the next level, give the Aesthetic Lounge Med Spa a call at 224-768-8028 or visit them at their location on North Bank Lane. It's an experience your skin will thank you for. We'd also like to say we're thankful for our Patreon supporters, Otto, John C., Helen, Herrick, and J.M.